Welcome to Unit 2, Module 3, Lesson 1, Recording List Items. Today we're going to talk about how to keep information inside of a list. Now, up to now, you've only been able to keep information inside of a single variable, which is not very helpful. If you want to keep track of a lot of information, and in addition, make it persistent. We'll talk more about that in a couple minutes, but make it so that when the app shuts off, we retain that information. That's fairly important when you're dealing with apps. So, how do you record something in a list? Well, first thing we have to do is create a new type of variable. It's called an empty list. You're going to name it just like we did any other variable, but it behaves a little bit differently. You use this command called add items to the list. You have to write the name of the list that you're talking about, and then you're going to put the item that you're going to add. Typically, it's some type of text item, but it doesn't have to be. You can add in any type. In fact, you can add in different types. This list is very flexible as to what you can put into it. So once you have it there, you can use that. For example, here we set the global variable list to this text box, which means it takes everything that's in that list and puts it in the text box. Suppose this list was a collection of notes that you took, or a shopping list. It would take everything that's contained in that list and put it into that text box. And then the other thing I did was note text box, I clear it out. So at some point we're going to be doing more with this. You can see that this is part of a bigger program. And the program that we're going to talk about building today, or at least examining, is a note taker, which is a very useful app to have. So that way when you type in a little note, it saves it for you, whether you want to use it as a to-do list or a calendar or a check-off list or just a series of notes. And it will retain that when you turn off the app, which is really important. That idea of persistence when the app shuts down is a new thing for us in this program. We haven't been able to do that before. When you turn off the app before, it kind of reset itself. Went back to the way it was when it first started. Now it will not. There will be data stored. So we have to talk about how do you store that data permanently. Right now, it's not permanent. The list variable itself is not permanent. When you turn it off, it will go away. To make it permanent, we need something that is called TinyDB. It's a database, and it gets stored on the device. So for you guys, if you're running Knox, it'll get stored on your computer. If you're running it on an Android app, it'll get stored inside the phone. So essentially, we're putting information and storing it permanently inside of a file that's on the phone. In order to make that happen, we're going to put the entire list into a database. The command to do that is actually pretty straightforward. We're going to take the global note list, and first thing we're going to do is take everything that is in the database called TinyDB1, and I'll show you where that is. We're going to get everything that is called notes, everything that has the tag of notes, and we're going to put it into our global variable. If it's not there, if notes is not in the database, we're going to create it. So this command does a couple things right here. It copies it into the variable when the program first initializes. So we're talking about this down here. So we initialize. We set the global variable to be whatever's in the database that has the tag called notes. If there's nothing in the database, we're going to put an empty list in there. So the first time this ever runs, that's the first time the database gets created. You don't have to do anything else. Once the database is created, the information will get copied into the database, and I'll show you that code in a minute or so. Let me show you first where you find your database at. So in App Inventor, if you scroll down, there's a tab here called Storage. And in here, there's something called TinyDB. There's actually two other things in here. We could have a file. We could have something called a Fusion Control Table. Fusion Control Tables are pretty cool. They link up to Google Docs. So you could have a Google form that is controlled to a Fusion Control Table that gives you the ability to do some multiplayer stuff, multiple people operating with the same file. Another way is a tiny web database. This we're not going to do because we don't have anywhere to store it. You need to store the web-based database somewhere, on a server somewhere that everyone would have access to it. But again, it would be a way of doing some type of multiplayer type of game where you're sharing information among different users. We're going to look at the TinyDB. And you just drag it in just like any other component we've put in and drop it in at the bottom. Once you've done that and you look at the code, we now have access to all of the commands that are associated with the TinyDB. So this is that command right here, the get value command, and our tag is going to be notes. We're just calling it. We could call it anything that we want, but we have to identify the name of the things that are in the database. This is called a field name. You can actually have more than one field and have different types of fields all within the same database. Maybe you have a field that's all the names. Maybe you have a field that's all the addresses. You could have one database do multiple different types of things and store multiple pieces of information. If we want to see if there's an item already in the list, okay, once we do this, we're going to call the tinydb.storeValue. This is what's going to store the value in our list, in our database. This has to be done every time we add information to the database. So we're going to essentially do this twice. Once we're going to add it to the list, then we're going to add the list to the database every time somebody adds something to the list, because there's no telling when they'll turn it off. And we don't want to have to make them use a button that says Save Data. It should do it for us automatically. We're used to that type of user interface, like in Google Docs, even in App Inventor, where it saves our data for us automatically. We don't need to press Save. It does it automatically. So we want to make sure that modality is kept. So every time we enter an item into our list, it's going to save our database. If we want to check to see if it's already in the list, whoops, I hit the wrong button. Before we add it to the list, we can use this command right here, isInList. So this is up to you. When you're doing a list, you might want to make sure it's a list of unique things. You might not. I mean, if you're counting the number of, if you're using it to keep book for a basketball game, let's say, and you were counting fouls, well, it's okay to have multiple fouls listed. You'd have foul, foul, foul. If you're using it to keep track of, let's say, unique people, we wouldn't want to put in the same person twice. We want to make sure that is a listing of unique things. So this becomes a very important design piece. You have to decide, do you allow repeats in the list? If you don't allow repeats in the list, we have to do an if statement before we add the item to the list. And we say, if it's not, there's our logical operator not, in the list. And we're going to check to see what's currently in the text box. And we're going to compare it against the list. We're going to see if it's not in the list. If it's not in the list, then we add it. And then we'd also add it to the database. Now you can make a choice here. You could say, well, we're always going to add, no matter what, we're always going to add that database after this point, or you could put the database add right here in the if statement. That's entirely up to you where you put that. It's a little bit more efficient if you put the database add inside the if statement. That way it's only accessing that when we do actually adding something to our list. So in code, this whole thing together, there we go, looks like this. So first we create our empty list. Then we have some type of button, a submit button, that checks to see if it's not in the list, then add it to the list. Also, submit the database. And then finally, update our list, which is just a label. So if we look at our designer, I have in here a text box. That's just a label called list label. It's just a big list label. Rather than being a single line, I have it set up so it's multiple lines. So I set it so it fills the parent. This is just a little note that says it's identifying what the box is. It's not used in code at all. So that's why it's just called label 1. We have our submit button here, which actually does our execution of our command. And we have our note text box. And this is where somebody would be typing in the note. So they type in a note, they hit submit, it gets added to our list, it gets added to our database, and the list label.text gets the entire list copied into it. And finally, it clears out that text box that they typed into. It's important that you clear that out for the user, again, for the user interface. They expect something visually to happen when they hit enter. When you type in something, you expect it to go away after you've pressed enter and it kind of looks like it moved into the list box. It's not necessary to do that. It'll still add to the list. It's just a user experience that most users expect. So here's what I'm going to have you guys do. This code I'm going to leave up here on the board. And I'm going to ask that you guys create this app. Just call it recorded list. I think that's what I called it. Record items. There we go. And I want you to create this in App Inventor, save it, because we're going to keep building with this into something bigger. All right? So I'm going to give you the rest of the period. It should only take you a couple minutes to do this. Go ahead and create that app and upload it into Blackboard. Under Unit 2, Module 3, Lesson 1, recording items in a list. And that's due today. Okay, so this should be done by the end of the class period. I'll put that back up. All right, good.